Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior developer advocate at GitHub, and I'm really excited to talk today about GitHub Copilot and about how to get the most out of this tool. That one thing that we will sometimes forget when we're looking at these AI tools is the fact that they are tools. They can often feel like magic. I type out a few words and voila, I've got this really, really cool thing. But at the end of the day, it's a tool just like our IDE, and we should spend a little bit of time seeing how we can get the most out of it. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about GitHub Copilot and how it works behind the scenes, and then we'll get into some tips and tricks that you can start to implement as you get in and explore the tool. So what is GitHub Copilot? So GitHub Copilot is a suite of tools. I'm going to be primarily focused in on code completion. So this is the embedded experience inside of your IDE, inside of your editor, where as you add in comments, as you add in code, it's then going to generate suggestions, generate what it thinks that you are looking for based on that information. So how does it do its thing behind the scenes? Well, as you're typing out your code, as you're typing out your comments, context is sent up to GitHub Copilot. I'm going to talk about that context in just a moment, but for right now, let's focus in on that processing. So that context is sent up to GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot then uses the OpenAI LLM behind the scenes, sees what it is that you're trying to do, and then in turn generates suggestions and sends those down to your IDE. You can then accept those, reject those, accept and modify, use that as the foundation, and it really does help keep you in the zone and help you avoid having to go off and maybe look up obscure syntax and things like that. Now, let's talk a bit about that context, because a lot of times there's some confusion about this. Exactly what is going to be sent up to GitHub Copilot? Well, the first and kind of the most obvious is the file that you are currently working on. And that's going to include the entirety of the file. So it's not just from where my cursor is and everything above it, but rather it's the start of the file, the bottom of the file, the middle of the file. So if I'm going in and I'm making updates, I'm adding new code, I'm making changes, it's going to look at the entirety of the file, not just from the cursor and above. The next big thing is the tabs that are open inside of your IDE. This sometimes causes confusion, and I'll admit for me personally, it also caused a little bit of confusion, because I honestly did think that it sent up the entirety of my project. And if we stop and think about that, that would be an awful lot of context for Copilot to try and figure out, try to parse out, try to figure out what's most important. Because if I think about, reading a very long article, I want to focus in on what's most important. And if there's 5,000 words, and this is really the only section that I'm interested in for this moment, the rest of that becomes a little bit superfluous. So we want to focus GitHub Copilot's attention on what's most important, and that's where those tabs come into play. It's going to focus in on what's most important based on those tabs. Additionally, it's also going to start from the inside and work its way out. So the tabs it will start with are the ones that are closest to the tab that I am currently working on. Now, one thing that sometimes people will do is they'll get a little bit too focused on trying to control the tabs, on trying to control the context that's going to be sent up. And honestly, if we think about the way that we typically write code, that if you're anything like me, and I know I am, that I will open up a file, I'll make some modifications, I'm going to open up a related file, I'm going to make some modifications, I'm going to open up another related file. And this is normally the way that we wind up doing our work. So by having GitHub Copilot focus in on those tabs, it's typically naturally automatically going to get the files that are already most related to what it is that I'm doing. Now, if I'm shifting tasks, if I'm maybe going to be taking a look at something that's a new feature that I'll be implementing, or if I know that I'm going to be working with a library or framework that Copilot has never seen before, then I might go ahead and very specifically open up a file, open up some representative example of what it is that I'm building. Or maybe I'm switching tasks, or maybe I am not getting the suggestions that I'm looking for back from GitHub Copilot. Then at that point, I might take another look at the files that I have open and maybe readjust at that point. But again, I really do want to highlight the fact that you will find most of the time, just through your normal usage patterns of an IDE, of your editor, that you'll just inherently be opening up the files that are most closely related to what it is that you are working on. Now let's get in and start to kind of build upon that and see how we can get the most out of this tool. And I'm going to potentially introduce a term that's new to you, a thing called prompt crafting. And in a nutshell, this is really about how it is that we are going to phrase and type out our comments, phrase and type out our code, phrase and type out our prompts to get the most out of these tools. That, as I highlighted at the start, AI is a tool. And I really do want to make sure that I've spent a little bit of time learning how to get the most out of it, just like with my IDE. This is what prompt crafting is all about. Now, if we break this down into a couple of components about how it is that we can help GitHub Copilot help us, the first is going to be the context. This is that surrounding information. What is it that we're trying to build? How is it that we are trying to build it? To start to then drill a little bit further down, the next is the intent. What is it that I'm doing? How is it that I'm trying to do? Why is it that I am trying to build that out? Next is the clarity. As a friend of mine likes to joke, don't use a big word when a diminutive one would use. That as I'm typing in my comment, as I'm trying to describe what it is that I'm doing, I want to make sure that I'm clear. So I might start to avoid a lot of vernacular. I might try to avoid maybe abbreviations that make sense to me internally, but might not be as clear, might not define truly what it is that I am trying to build. Last but not least is specificity. This is where I'm going to get in and identify exactly what it is that I want. Let's take, for example, the phrase, "go get me some ice cream." Now, I've provided enough information to complete that task. You know that you should go off and go grab some ice cream. That's wonderful. But what flavor of ice cream? What vessel? Should there be sprinkles? Don't know. So have I given enough information to complete the task? Yeah. Am I going to be satisfied with the result? Maybe not, because I'm going to be looking for salted caramel in a waffle cone. And the answer is always sprinkles. Yes, always sprinkles. So what I really wanted to do, if I was going to craft that out, say using prompt crafting, is make sure that I'm providing all of that specificity, all of that information up front. And this is one of the big mistakes that I see developers make when they first get in and start playing around with Copilot. That they assume, oh, I can just type out a couple of words, I can type out a couple of sentences, and voila, I'm going to get this very big thing. That's not really how it works, that we want to make sure that we're providing good, clear prompts. I think the best way to do this is really start to put it into action. So before I get into this demo, I promise you there's going to be a demo here in just a moment. Let's take a look at a couple of real quick best practices. First up is describe the goal. I like to view this as adding a header, if you will, to the file. This doesn't have to be anything real in depth per se, just 3-4 quick sentences describing what it is that I'm looking to build. If the framework isn't implied based on the file that I'm working on, maybe I'll add that in. You know, kind of what's the goal? How is it that I'm trying to do this? Just a couple, 3 lines up at the very top, add those in. Next is be flexible. We always need to remember that AI tools are probabilistic, not deterministic. And so what this means is that I could be in the exact same scenario. I could type out a comment, I could type out a phrase and get one suggestion. And then in that exact same scenario the next day, I might get back something different. The tools are probabilistic. This is simply how these work. And that's all right. So I just need to be a little bit flexible. If I don't see what it is that I'm looking for the first time, maybe reframe what it is that I am doing. And one big thing that you can do to really help out is to provide examples. So let's say that I'm going to be processing data. Let's say that I'm going to be doing some validation. If I give a set of examples, then I'm going to be very clearly defining to GitHub Copilot what it is that I'm looking for. So let's take a look here. I've got an application that I'm going to be building out using Python Django. Python Django, one of my favorite frameworks, it's there to create front ends for back-end databases. And the first thing that I need to do is to build out my models, to describe my data here. So I'm going to start towards the top of my file here and describe what I'm doing. I'm building out a conference website. So build out a conference website, and I'm going to have add a speaker, a track, and a talk, and make sure that parent can't be deleted if there are children. So in other words, what I'm trying to specify here is if I have a primary foreign key relationship and I try to delete that primary, but there are foreign keys, don't allow those to be deleted. So just a couple, 3 sentences there. Describe what it is that I'm doing, add some constraints, and now I'm ready to start adding in my code. And you'll actually notice that gray italicized text there, that's GitHub Copilot in action. It's making those suggestions. I actually haven't done anything yet, and it's already starting to make code suggestions. I can accept what this is going to give me by hitting tab, but I'm going to be a little bit more specific. So I want a speaker. Speaker should have name, email, and LinkedIn, like that. And let me just give it one quick extra return here. And let's see, speaker, whoops, let's do this. Let me be more specific here. I'm learning from myself here. Create a speaker model with name, email, and LinkedIn. There we go. Give this a moment. Perfect. So what you notice there is previously I was saying should. Now I'm being a little bit more specific about what it is that I want. I'm being flexible, rolling with it. I go back, I tell it create, and now it's doing its thing. And so now if I hit tab, now it's got all of that information that I specified. So it's got my name, it's got my email, and it's got that LinkedIn URL. You might also notice it's including a little thing that I didn't ask for. It's including that override of the str function. This is something that's very common in Django, and it just automatically added that in. I could remove that if I want to, but I actually like that. That's a very common convention inside of Django. So with that speaker created, the next thing that I want to do is let's create a track. So let's say create a track with a name and description, sure, and maybe an abbreviation, like that. There we go. Give that a moment, and that will go ahead and set that up for me. Again, it's reading that comment and then adding the rest down below. Now, as I've highlighted, be specific. You'll notice that I said abbreviation. And so it said, all right, fine, I'll give you an abbreviation. Abbreviation is probably 3 characters. And that's what I'm seeing right here, is it set up that abbreviation with that max length of 3 characters. But chances are, if I'm going to be looking for an abbreviation, I want something that's a little bit more specific. So I want this abbreviation to be specifically 3 letters, and maybe 3 uppercase letters. So let's go back and just make that modification. I'm just going to get rid of that, and I'm just going to say abbreviation should be 3 uppercase letters, just like that. And now it will go ahead and build that out with that regular expression. Now, I don't know about you, but at least for me, I can read regular expressions, and something like this I could certainly have typed out off the top of my head. Although, if I'm being perfectly honest, I do sometimes forget which is which, if it's the caret or the $sign, to pin to the beginning, pin to the end. So it's nice not to have to always go look those types of things up. So I was able to just describe, this is what I want. It generated that regular expression. So I was flexible there, I was specific, and it gave me back that, that value there. Pretty cool. Last but not least, let's go ahead and create that talk. It's already adding in that comment. I'm going to go ahead and hit tab to accept this. Let me read. Title, description, speaker, track, and date. Perfect. Let's go ahead and accept that. And give it 2 seconds here. Perfect. And now we'll go ahead and put all of that in. So now it's got my title, it's got my description, it's got my speaker, it's got my track, it's got my date, and then a little bit of extra stuff down at the very bottom here. And I'm going to kind of leave that the way that it is for the moment. But the big thing that I want to point out is that, unfortunately, it didn't quite pick up what it was that I was looking for. That if we remember from the very beginning here, let me scroll all the way back up. I specified in my little header that I wanted to make sure that a parent can't be deleted if there are children. Unfortunately, this didn't pick up on that. Maybe I just wasn't clear enough. Maybe I needed to use the specific vocabulary. Who knows? But that's all right. I could go back and I could modify it. Now, before I do that, though, I actually want to get into the next set of tips here. And the first is to name things properly. I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit between the slide and this code here to kind of make some points. And the first is right here on LinkedIn. What you're going to notice is that when I added in that comment of create speaker model with name, email, and LinkedIn, that it automatically set up that LinkedIn as a URL field, which is probably exactly what I wanted. How did it do that? Well, it did that because it's actually reading my variable name here. So it sees LinkedIn, it goes, oh, okay, you probably want a URL, and it will automatically put that in there. Which also then means that if I'm looking for good suggestions from GitHub Copilot, that I want to make sure that my variable names are also good. One of my pet peeves in coding is abbreviations, is single letter variable names. Because when I go back and I take a look at that code, it's not always clear to me what that code is supposed to be doing. And when it comes to abbreviations, sure, maybe we've got documented somewhere what abbreviations mean and so forth, but that's now institutional knowledge. That's something that my developers would need to learn. And the exact same thing would then wind up holding true with GitHub Copilot, is it's not going to have that same experience as my developers. It's not always going to be able to pick up what those abbreviations mean. So if I've got good code, if I'm spelling these things out, I'm not only making it clear to my other developers, but I'm also making it clear to GitHub Copilot, which, going back to that analogy of it being an AI pair programmer, I kind of want to treat it as such. I want to make sure that I'm being clear to it. So because of the fact that I use LinkedIn here, it was able to go, oh, okay, I know what you're doing. And it added in that, that URL field. Now, keeping along with that using good code, let's come back down here to where that little problem is that I highlighted a moment ago. Right now, the speaker and track are both set to cascade. If you're not already familiar with Django, what that means is that if I had a speaker and they had talks, I delete that speaker, all of those talks are now going to go away. That was not what I was looking for. So fortunately, I can change this. Let me actually just get rid of that full track line right there, and let me, sound effects help, by the way, there we go, perfect. Let me go ahead and say protect. So by saying protect, what that now means is it's going to prevent a talk or a speaker from being deleted if they have talks. That was the behavior that I was looking for. Now that I've done that, let me hit return here. And what you're going to notice is that with track, it's going to follow that pattern. So it's going to learn by watching me. So it's picking up that context, following along. One of the most common questions that I get asked is, hey, we have certain conventions, that we have certain, conventions for naming our variables or whatever it is that it might be. How do I make sure that GitHub Copilot will follow along with this? The simplest way that you can do that is show it some code that's written the way that you're looking for it to be written, and it will then follow along with you. Kind of reads perfectly into following best practices. GitHub Copilot is going to see what you're doing, and it will follow right along with that. Last but not least is, like I highlighted up at towards the middle, I guess, is to make sure that you are opening up relevant files. So if I'm adding in code, not quite getting what I'm looking for, make sure that I've got my relevant files open. All right, let's keep building here. And I want to create some views to display the data that I've now got for my website. So I need to import it in a little bit of code here. So GitHub Copilot sees that I'm doing Django, automatically pulled that in. Let me just go ahead and hit tab, hit a couple of carriage returns, and now notice this next line here. The next line that it automatically is adding in is it's importing in my talk, my track, my speaker. It's doing that because it's now seeing my models tab open, it knows what's inside of there, and will automatically import those in. Let me go ahead and now start creating views for my, let's say for my talk. So let's go ahead and say create a list view for my talks. There we go. And it will go ahead and set that up for me. Now, what this is doing in Python Django is this is specifying that the model that we're going to be working with is talk, that when I actually go to display the data, it's going to have an object name of talks, and the HTML template that it's going to use is going to be that talk list. Now, this is probably one of my favorite little things about Django, is because this is a framework that is built to very quickly allow me to build front ends for databases, it includes a lot of pre-baked code for me that I don't have to go in and create. But as with most frameworks, I would say, it's not always going to be the most performant right out of the box. That by default, what this is going to do is it's going to do a thing called lazy loading, meaning that when it goes to display every single talk, it's going to have to go back and go get the speaker. It's going to have to go back and get the track to display that out. Obviously, I don't want all of those round trips to my database. That's all right. I can avoid that. That what I can do is I can add in a comment describing what I want. So I can say, hey, select the name and ID for the track. Whoops. I have a great memory. It's just really short. When I said track, did I say name? I did. There we go. Never doubt yourself. And the name and ID for speaker. And now, when I add that in, let's say pre-select. There we go. Boop. There we go. And so now it's going to go ahead and it's going to do the select related for my track and for my speaker. It unfortunately didn't pick up on that name or on that ID. That is not a problem. I can just go back and again, kind of just roll with it here. Be flexible. So I'm going to say track __ ID. And now I'll say track name. And this should pick up here. Let me just get rid of that. There we go. And now it's picked up on that ID and it's picked up on that name for me. So again, be flexible with it. Kind of roll with it and it will then help you out. Now, That's for all of my talks. Let me go ahead and create one for a detail for my talks. Copilot knows where I'm going. So I'll go ahead and hit Tab, accept that. There we go, and accept that. And just like we saw before, because of the fact that I did that pre-select previously, it automatically adds that in. So it's following along based on what it is that I am doing here. And that's going to be one of the big takeaways, again, that I want to make sure that I highlight. It will follow along with you. OK, one last little thing to highlight here is, let's go back over here to my talk, and let's add in one last little thing. So up until now, what I've been focused in on is trying to kind of get the most out of GitHub Copilot, to build out my model, to build out my view. And now I want to see how I could, take this little talk here, maybe to one last little level, add in a dynamic field for my code. So every talk should have a code. That should be the, in my case, my track, maybe a level, and then the ID for the talk. And so I'm going to build that out here. So let me first up add in a level, add a level field with value range from 1 to 3, just like that. And so it's got my min and my max of 1 to 3. That's perfect. And now let's go ahead and create a computed field called code. Code should have the track, a dash, the level, and 2 digits from the ID. Now, if you remember previously, one of the things that we talked about is give it an example. So it might be able to pick this up from this, but I don't know about you, but at least for me, I always like to see examples. Examples are a great way to kind of describe and also to document. So I put in one more comment, and it automatically kind of picked this up. So it automatically added an example of, in this case, PYT-101. That's perfect. I'll accept that. And then go ahead and hit return. It's going to add in with my property, hit return. And then now it will build out that property for me. So now it's got that abbreviation, it's got that level, and it's got this ID of 02. Now in this case, it already did that by utilizing fstring. Again, going back to specificity, if I want to make sure that it does it a particular way, just ask it to do it that way. So if it didn't give me that level of specificity, if it didn't give me that fstring, then I can go back and be a little bit more specific. So I kind of want to go back here and flow back through all of this one last time. Number 1, describe the goal. At the top of the file, add in a little quick comment, couple lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, what you're doing, how it is that you're going to do it, any relevant information that you think that GitHub Copilot might need. Number 2, be flexible. We saw this as we went through our demos here, that GitHub Copilot is probabilistic, that it's not always going to give you back the exact same values in the exact same situation. Things will sometimes change, and we want to be flexible with that. Number 3 is provide examples. And this can be really helpful to GitHub Copilot to be able to understand what it is that I am trying to accomplish. As a side note, one question that I very frequently get asked is about those comments. Should we remove them? Should we add them? My personal opinion is leave them behind. And the reason for that is because they are artifacts. It was how my code was generated, and I want to be able to see this. And if we're later going to go back and do any fine-tuning on that model, having that text describing what it was that was built is going to be really helpful. Always remember, and this is kind of a universal truth, I think, that good code begets good code. Name things properly. Follow best practices. When you do that, GitHub Copilot will follow along with that. And then finally, the most important part, probably the theme of this entire presentation, is, above all else, go with the flow. With that, I want to thank you for your time.